I am Don, and my wife is Carla. We have been married for 8.5 years and are the proud parents of two wonderful children, an 8-year-old son named Steve and a 4-year-old daughter named Lori. Our journey together began uniquely, as Carla was pregnant at the time of our marriage, and our son Steve entered our lives just 6 months after we said our vows. The announcement of our wedding did not create much of a stir among our friends and family, with the notable exception of Carla's parents. Their reaction was one of disappointment, stemming from their belief that their daughter had somehow compromised her future. In their eyes, I was the catalyst of this predicament. They placed the blame squarely on my shoulders for getting Carla pregnant, viewing me as the individual who had derailed her opportunities and aspirations. Carla's parents had a vision of the type of man they wanted for their daughter, and I was not that man. They perceived that Carla settled for me, which weighed heavily on my conscience. While it is true that I played a role in her pregnancy and that I was her first romantic partner, I firmly believe that their judgment of me stems more from their inability to accept her choices than from any faults they perceive in my character. I cherish Carla with a depth of love that far surpasses what they could have ever wished for her, yet that truth remains hidden beneath their disappointment. They are unable to see beyond the circumstances surrounding her pregnancy, and no actions I could take would ever shift their perspective. As I see it, I will always be the villain in their story, a status that will likely persist until the end of their lives. Our story began in Chicago Heights when I met Carla during her senior year of high school, while I was in my second year at the University of Illinois in Champaign. From the moment we crossed paths, I felt an undeniable connection, as if we were destined to be together. Our relationship blossomed quickly, we became inseparable, and it felt like we were crafted from the same fabric. The intimacy of our relationship deepened soon after we started dating. Within a month, I took her purity, and thereafter, we shared countless intimate moments together. Following her graduation from high school, Carla returned to live with her parents and took a job as a bank teller at Chase Manhattan. I made it a point to see her nearly every weekend, whether in Chicago Heights or at my family home in Oak Lawn. The trajectory of our lives took a significant turn when, with just a year left in my college studies, I discovered that Carla was 2 months pregnant. We quickly made arrangements for a wedding and tied the knot in November, with our son Steve arriving just 6 months later in May. I completed my degree 2 weeks after Steve's birth and found employment in airport security at O'Hare Airport. During the time leading up to my graduation, Carla stayed with her parents, ensuring everything was in place for our new family. Soon, we moved into our first apartment together, marking the beginning of our life as a family unit. The next 8 years unfolded with a sense of bliss. Our love continued to flourish as we navigated the challenges of life together. We found better job opportunities, moved into a new home, and watched Steve grow into a bright young boy. Our marriage was fulfilling, further enriched with the birth of our daughter Lori, who brought even more joy into our lives. As we settled into a routine, promotions and increased income seemed to follow along with our happiness, solidifying our contentment as a family. However, the tranquility of our life was about to be disrupted. I entered a period of unexpected discontent, characterized by ongoing disputes with Carla stemming from our differing sleep habits. We both claimed that the other's snoring was the culprit behind our sleep deprivation. I would voice my frustrations, asserting that her snoring kept me awake, while Carla would turn the tables, accusing me of the same. Despite acknowledging that I, too, snored at times, it felt unjust to bear blame for the issue solely on my shoulders. I believed I had already faced enough criticism from her parents, and it was disheartening to feel the same resentment from my wife. In an attempt to resolve this issue lightheartedly, I brought home a voice-activated recorder from work and set it up on our nightstand. With a playful spirit, I suggested to Carla that we would soon uncover the truth of who was the greater offender in our nighttime symphony of sounds. The next morning, we awoke together, and after exchanging sweet morning greetings, we eagerly rewound the tape to listen to the recording. The results were both revealing and humorous. My snoring was indeed reminiscent of a chainsaw, and she seized the opportunity to tease me about the ordeal I subjected her to each night. However, it didn't take long for us to hear her unmistakable snoring punctuating the pauses of my loud snores, producing an array of tiny squeaks. The moment Carla realized the truth, her eyes widened in disbelief, followed by an eruption of laughter between us. She exclaimed in delight, "Oh my goodness, I'm terrible." This realization sparked a joy-filled moment, reinforcing our love and ability to find humor in challenges. We both erupted into laughter, collectively recognizing that we were both guilty in our nightly escapades, and that laughter would be the best remedy for our sleepless nights. Both of us recognized the urgent need to address the issues plaguing our relationship, particularly as the potential consequence could lead to a painful separation that would affect our shared sanctuary, the bedroom we cherished. I voiced my agreement, acknowledging that her persistent snoring was indeed an issue we could no longer overlook. It was a relief not to bear the exclusive blame for the discontent that had crept into our lives. In a light-hearted moment, she playfully smacked my arm and offered an apology, expressing regret for placing all the responsibility for our relationship troubles squarely on my shoulders. With a newfound understanding between us, I pulled her close, enveloping her in a warm embrace, punctuated with passionate kisses that fostered an atmosphere of intimacy. We shared tender moments together, which helped to reaffirm our connection, but as often happens with young children, the peace was short-lived. By the time we concluded our affectionate exchange, both of our kids had awakened, and we found ourselves rushing to prepare for work. As is typical in our busy lives, the chaos that ensued led to the inevitable oversight. I forgot the recorder we had been using to document the issues related to her snoring. A couple of days passed, and my wife requested that I come home early to care for the kids while she attended a meeting at the bank. During my time at home, I spotted the recorder and, unable to resist the allure of playback, I decided to listen to it. My intention was to find evidence of her snoring, but I was met with a shocking revelation that shattered my understanding of our marriage. Instead of the anticipated sounds of her snoring, I was confronted with the intimate and undeniable evidence of us engaging in passionate lovemaking. What unfolded next was a harrowing discovery: she had been unfaithful in the very bed we had shared as a couple. The realization that she had invited another man into our sacred space was a wound too deep for words. In an instant, the foundation of trust upon which our marriage stood began to crumble. Uncertain of how to process my emotions, I reached out to our neighbor, Judy, asking her if she could watch the children temporarily because I needed to focus on an urgent work project that demanded my undivided attention. To my relief, Judy had no prior obligations and readily agreed to help. I took the kids over to her home, instructing them to behave and assuring them I would return in time for dinner. They were more than happy to spend time playing with Judy's children, who were of similar ages. Upon returning to the bedroom, I resumed listening to the recording, which continued to unfold revelations that felt like a dagger to my heart. The voices on the tape, those intimate exchanges filled with longing, made it painfully clear how deep the betrayal ran. "Oh my goodness, Steve, it has been far too long since we have been close. I have missed this so much over the past few months," my wife's voice echoed across the room. "Don't worry, my dear, I will be intimate with you this afternoon. I genuinely want you to become pregnant today. Dawn and I want another child, and it would bring me immense joy if all three of my kids shared the same father." As I listened, I found myself grappling with the devastating implications of her words. Doubts about her other partner, Dawn, flooded my mind as she questioned whether he had ever been suspicious of her infidelity. There was a conversation about the resemblance of the children, suggesting that Dawn had been kept in the dark about the truth of their parentage. The notion that my wife felt the need to concoct lies just to maintain this double life made the betrayal feel even more profound. The recording continued, filled with the sounds of their passion, and I refrained from focusing on the graphic details, for they were far too painful to revisit. After listening to the entire recording, it struck me with a powerful clarity: my marriage had been nothing more than a carefully constructed facade. The love and trust one believed existed between us had been merely a hollow pretense. How could she claim to love me while engaging in such treachery? The anguish I experienced was overwhelming. It felt as though I had been struck by a powerful force, leaving me physically unwell, my heart racing in protest against the emotional turmoil. A wave of repulsion washed over me, coupled with a sense of emasculation, fear, and sheer fury. While words could hardly capture the extent of my devastation, they seemed inadequate to convey the depth of my heartbreak. In that moment of clarity and pain, I understood that I could not remain stagnant. I was not a man prone to foolish decisions. I knew I had to devise a strategy for my next steps. I needed to consider what this revelation meant for me, for my family, and for the life we had built together. The first step was to secure evidence of my wife's betrayal. I was certain that this recording could play a crucial role in whatever lay ahead. The recorder featured a dual tape system, so I carefully set it to copy the original tape to a new one, ensuring I had a duplicate for safekeeping. Once that task was complete, I placed the copy in a plain envelope and stored it in the trunk of my car. No matter what unfolded in the coming hours or days, would have this document as proof. Secondly, I recognized the necessity of keeping my newfound knowledge confidential, for now. I understood that I needed to formulate a plan before confronting her with what I had discovered. As I rewound the tape, my mind raced through potential scenarios and strategies, bracing myself for the tumultuous path that lay ahead. After stopping the recording during the snoring segment, I carefully placed the recorder back on the nightstand and exited the bedroom. A troubling thought crossed my mind. If Carla were to consider the implications of the recording, she might speculate about the possibility of her and Steve being captured on tape. However, the reality was that she would not hear anything incriminating, and I made a conscious decision not to disclose my awareness of her hidden truth. It was essential for me to gather all relevant information before making any conclusions about how to proceed. To begin this process, I reflected on the circumstances surrounding my initial encounter with Carla. Our relationship blossomed through a mutual connection. A friend of hers from high school was dating my cousin, which provided us with the opportunity to become acquainted. I realized that examining our high school yearbooks could yield valuable insights. With a specific goal in mind, I descended into the basement, where I began sifting through boxes until I located the one containing our yearbooks. I took both of our yearbooks and discreetly placed them in the trunk of my car, ensuring that I returned the boxes to their original arrangement to avoid arousing any suspicion. In the event Carla noticed their absence, I could easily suggest they had been misplaced in the shuffle of moving boxes. Moreover, I recognized that if I encountered Carla later that evening, she would undoubtedly sense my internal turmoil. To mitigate this, I reached out to my boss, Jim, who had become a trusted friend over my years at work. I recounted my recent discoveries and asked for his assistance in covering for me for several days, allowing me the time needed to uncover the truth and come to a resolution. I proposed a fabricated trip to New York, citing an anti-terrorism training program that aligned perfectly with the types of courses I had taken previously. This rationale was sound and would likely not raise any eyebrows. Jim, understanding the importance of my request, agreed to orchestrate the cover story, emphasizing that this opportunity had arisen unexpectedly and was imperative for my professional development. With urgency, I communicated the need for a flight within the next hour. I then called Carla on her cell phone to inform her about the urgent trip Jim had arranged. I mentioned that I had arranged for the kids to stay with Judy, prompting her to prepare for my sudden departure by packing quickly and heading to the airport. Although she expressed her displeasure at my abrupt exit, I maintained that there was nothing I could do and bid her farewell. As I hung up, I caught the words, "I love you, Dawn," but I found myself unable to reciprocate. Upon arriving at Judy's house, I explained my unexpected travel plans and noted that Carla would be coming by shortly to pick up the children. Judy was amenable to this arrangement, and I took the opportunity to bring Steve and Lori home with me to pack and say my goodbyes. Before departing, I recognized the necessity of obtaining DNA samples from the kids. Using Q-tip swabs, I successfully collected saliva samples from both Steve and Lori, intending to have their DNA analyzed against my own. This analysis would serve to confirm what I already suspected following Carla's confession on the tape. After packing sufficient clothing for a few days, I left my home with the children and returned them to Judy, expressing my gratitude for her willingness to look after them on such short notice. Once I had ensured their care, I headed to a hotel in Harvey, a suburb on the south side of Chicago. This location was strategic, as it was far enough away from Chicago Heights to minimize the chances of encountering Carla's family while still serving as a practical base for my investigation. After checking in, I decided to pick up some beer, feeling that it would provide a temporary escape from the emotional turmoil surrounding me. Drinking seemed like the only way to avoid the pain and heartache that haunted my thoughts. Instead of lying awake all night, lost in anguish, I sought solace in intoxication. The following morning brought with it the consequences of my choices. I woke up feeling wretched, the clock reading past 11 a.m. An intense headache and an upset stomach made me question whether I would survive until noon. In a moment of poorly judged clarity, I opted for a couple more beers, which bizarrely turned out to be a fortuitous decision. Upon waking again, I found that it was now 3 p.m., and my condition had improved slightly. I ordered coffee and toast from room service, and while waiting for my meal, I took a shower and dressed in clean clothes. The coffee was a welcome comfort, and I managed to keep the toast down. With a sense of steeling myself for the remainder of the day, I turned to my cell phone, hoping to find messages that might guide my next steps. As I checked for any updates, I discovered 3 missed calls, each one potentially carrying information critical to unraveling the tangled web surrounding my life. Upon checking my phone, I discovered 3 missed calls, the first of which was from Carla. She expressed her frustration over my failure to contact her upon my arrival in New York City. The lack of communication had left her anxious and confused, particularly since she was unaware of my accommodation details. Carla insisted that I call her immediately once I had received her message, highlighting her concern and irritation regarding my absence of communication. The second call from Carla had come earlier in the morning and revealed a deeper level of anger. Her tone suggested that she was truly upset with me for not reaching out either last night or that morning. Despite her evident irritation, I felt a sense of detachment from her emotions and decided to postpone addressing her grievances. In my mind, her anger had already escalated, so I reasoned that a further delay wouldn't significantly worsen the situation. I found humor in the absurdity of the predicament, amused by the fact that I could maintain my composure amid her rising frustration. The third call I discovered was from Jim, which had come shortly after Carla's second message. He informed me that Carla had been inquiring about my whereabouts and was demanding an explanation for my silence. Jim mentioned that I owed him a significant favor for managing to handle Carla's agitation. He candidly admitted that he had no more information than she did regarding my location since he was unaware of the hotel where I was staying. Furthermore, he informed Carla about a seminar taking place at a conference center located at JFK Airport, suggesting that she could attempt to contact me there. However, we both recognized the challenges posed by airport security protocols, which would make it nearly impossible for her to find me, especially since I was not present at that venue. This knowledge provided me with a sense of security until I decided to eventually return her call. I estimated that I had a couple of hours available to focus on my project before Carla would return home from work. Seizing the opportunity, I settled down with my laptop and diligently began working through a comprehensive checklist. I meticulously detailed everything I already knew and pinpointed the specific information I still needed to acquire. In an effort to gather relevant data, I sifted through Carla's yearbook to compile a list of names of classmates who had written messages to her during her junior and senior years. I cross-referenced these names by their respective class years. Additionally, I reached out to her high school to inquire about a reunion book for her upcoming 5-year reunion. The administrative assistant was remarkably accommodating, even offering me a copy of the 10-year reunion book, which was set to take place soon. I requested if it could be sent to me electronically and promptly provided my email address. Within 5 minutes, I received the requested documents and began pairing names from the yearbook with their married surnames, as well as gathering their current contact information, including addresses and phone numbers. The information I collected proved to be an invaluable resource, allowing me to compile the most current list imaginable. I uncovered various details about Carla's former classmates, including the names of their children, pets, hobbies, and preferences regarding food. Moreover, I stumbled upon the fact that Carla had recently submitted our current family information for the reunion, which notably included a footnote indicating that we were hoping to add a third child to our family soon. Realizing that Carla would likely be returning from work soon, I prepared myself to make the dreaded phone call to her, knowing I would have to confront her anger head-on. My writing had increasingly reflected my disdain for her feelings lately, a sentiment I no longer felt inclined to conceal. I held her responsible for my current emotional state, and thus, I didn't mind if any sarcasm emanated through our conversation. When I finally called her, she reacted with immediate exasperation. "Dawn, where the hell have you been? Why didn't you return my call last night or this morning? What is going on?" I had anticipated her outburst and allowed her to vent her frustrations. In response, I explained that my late arrival had discouraged me from making a call for fear of waking the kids. I admitted to feeling somewhat sorry for myself, which had led to an indulgence in drinking, resulting in my decision to forego any communication until morning. I further explained that I had stayed at the Hilton Garden Inn at JFK Airport the previous night but had only booked a room for a single night, necessitating a search for a different hotel for the following nights. In an effort to maintain some level of contact, I suggested that she continue calling my cell phone, emphasizing that it would be the most effective way to reach me, even though I would be unable to answer during my classes. To create further distance, I decided to acquire a prepaid disposable cell phone, allowing me to manage my communications discreetly while still providing a means for Carla to contact me, albeit with careful orchestration. With a specific purpose in mind, I made my way to the nearby pharmacy to purchase a track phone. The device was attractively priced and, crucially, offered the anonymity I sought, making it an ideal choice for my needs. By the time I completed the transaction and hung up the phone, I noted the time. It was nearly 6 p.m. Surprisingly, I felt a sense of well-being wash over me, and my stomach began to rumble with hunger. Spotting George's Ribs House on my route back to the hotel, I decided it would be a fitting stop to grab a meal before returning to my accommodations. Once I arrived back at the hotel, I prepared to immerse myself in research. I began by meticulously examining Carla's senior yearbook, turning the pages one by one, studying each entry closely. My objective was to compile a comprehensive list of individuals who had written comments. As I typed out these notes, I developed a coding system to classify the nature of each comment. I categorized each contributor as follows: M or FM for friends, girlfriend for those who appeared to be part of Carla's inner circle, boyfriend for past romantic interests, and non-friend for any negative remarks. This organized approach allowed me to create a structured list of approximately 40 names, featuring roughly 30 females and 10 males. I prioritized the organization of this list first by gender and then by further coded distinctions. In the male category, I identified 5 boyfriends, 4 friends, and 1 non-friend. Among these names, Steve Wilson caught my attention as a potential suspect. However, I recognized the need for further investigation to confirm any assumptions. Meanwhile, the non-friend, a male named Gil Roberts, emerged as a promising avenue for information, particularly due to his negative history with Carla, or possibly his own grievances against Steve. Turning my focus to the female comments, I noted the presence of 3 girlfriends, about 25 friends, and 2 non-friends. Notably, the 3 girlfriends had served as bridesmaids at our wedding, which necessitated a cautious approach in any interactions with them. I also considered that some of the friends might hold valuable pieces of information regarding Carla's current situation. I intended to concentrate my efforts on the non-friends, as individuals who harbor discontent often reveal more in conversations. To enhance my investigation, I cross-referenced my list with details from the reunion booklet, including married names, addresses, phone numbers, spouse names, children's names, hobbies, interests, and other relevant data. I made an effort to gather occupational information and employment details where possible. While the completeness of available information varied, I found a wealth of data that could prove useful. My rationale was straightforward: the more information I acquired, the greater my chances of uncovering the full narrative surrounding Carla and her suspected lover. By the time I finalized my list and compiled the information, the clock had ticked past 10 p.m., prompting me to conclude my efforts for the day. I had determined that I would begin anew early the next morning, with the intention of wrapping up my inquiries by the end of the day. With this plan in mind, I decided to call it a night and focus on getting a restful sleep. As I turned down the bed covers and prepared for sleep, my cell phone rang. A glance at the clock revealed it was only 10:30 p.m., the children were surely asleep, and Carla likely had just finished watching the evening news and was settling in for the night. I answered the phone, curious about what she might want to discuss. "Hi Dawn, I thought maybe you'd call me tonight after getting settled," she began. "Well, I did consider it, but the last time I reached out, I ended up with quite an earful," I replied cautiously, "so I decided to wait and see if you wanted to talk." "I'm sorry for getting snippy with you earlier," she said, her tone softer. "I was just upset because I couldn't reach you. This whole trip of yours seems a bit strange, and I guess I was feeling a bit insecure. Will you forgive me?" "That doesn't exactly sound like forgiveness, honey," I shot back, my irritation surfacing. "Well, maybe I'm a little ticked off myself considering how you've treated me," I added, reflecting my frustration. A silence settled between us, and I couldn't discern whether she suspected I had uncovered something important or if she was simply reflecting on the issues that had strained our marriage. I secretly hoped she was contemplating the damage that had been done. After a moment, she sighed, "Well, I guess I'll let you go then, Dawn. I'm sorry. I love you. I'm sorry too. Good night, Carla," I responded, and as the call ended, I managed to drift into sleep, feeling the weight of the day's events settle around me. Although my surroundings were somewhat restless, I found a slight comfort in the absence of her snoring. However, a wave of sadness washed over me as I reflected on it. She had been so adorable the moment she first became aware of how loud her snoring was. We had shared fits of laughter about it, creating a light-hearted memory that I cherished deeply. That joy from the laughter transitioned into a beautiful morning where we relished the events of the previous night, reminiscing about our shared moments, including the recollection of what had transpired and speculating about future possibilities that might never materialize. This contemplation tugged at my heartstrings once again, and eventually, I surrendered to sleep out of sheer exhaustion. The following day, I rose early, eager to get started on my tasks. With a meticulous approach, I utilized my tracking phone to reach out to a number of female friends. Under the guise of Roger Moore from Homeland Security, I initiated contact with them, explaining that I was conducting a background check on Don Phillips, who was being considered for a position within the Chicago Area Anti-Terrorism Task Force. I mentioned that Mr. Phillips was married to Carla Pon, and I inquired if any of them recalled her from their high school days. My inquiries were directed toward uncovering any relevant connections Carla had during her formative years. As these conversations progressed, I learned that Steve Wilson had been Carla's boyfriend during high school. Their relationship had lasted about 3 years, but she had broken it off a couple of months after they graduated. Through my investigation, I discovered that Steve was still residing in Chicago Heights, where he worked as a loan officer at Chase Manhattan Bank. Surprisingly, he had recently experienced a divorce and was now a father to 2 boys. Consulting a reunion booklet, I located his entry. He was undeniably a handsome man, and I could easily understand why he would attract attention. I found myself wishing to possess a fraction of his charm, yet, despite their prior relationship, Carla had chosen me and shared her virginity with me. Nevertheless, it seemed she maintained connections with him long after we met, including allowing him to father our children, a fact that remained shrouded in mystery for me. I pondered the reasons behind her choices, wondering if perhaps she could provide clarity, although I was uncertain if she had the answers I sought. Although Carla ended her romantic relationship with Steve shortly after we began dating, their professional relationship at the bank continued until our move to Des Plaines. This proximity could have easily rekindled old flames, yet the motivations behind her decisions continued to perplex me. After compiling enough information from friends, I resolved to approach a different female acquaintance, Jill Johnson. Maintaining my pretense as Roger Moore from Homeland Security, I inquired about any significant aspects of Carla Peterson's background that might be relevant given Don Phillips's potential role in national security. To my surprise, Jill launched into a scathing critique. She asserted with conviction that Carla was the most disagreeable person to have graduated from Chicago Heights High School. According to Jill, Carla had a reputation for stealing boyfriends and being unfaithful. Intrigued, I requested clarification regarding her strong feelings. Jill recounted how during her sophomore year, she had been dating Steve Wilson when Carla intervened and disrupted their relationship. While she acknowledged that boyfriend stealing was not a criminal offense, she believed that such actions reflected poorly on Carla's character. As time progressed and Carla entered into marriage with Don, Jill felt that Carla's character flaws became increasingly evident. She confided in me that, according to rumors, largely propagated by Steve, Carla had resumed her liaison with him after they both began working at the bank. Steve reportedly boasted about having fathered 2 of Carla's children and had even announced that she was expecting again, which sent ripples through the gossip circuit. Jill expressed her skepticism about entrusting national security responsibilities to Don Phillips, given his wife's perceived infidelities. I had not anticipated such a transparent revelation, nor had I expected the emotional turmoil it would invoke within me. The realization that others had been privy to these dynamics while I remained in the dark was deeply unsettling. Determined to uncover more, I decided to reach out to the other female acquaintance for further insights. Her narrative mirrored Jill's closely. As the sister of Steve's ex-wife, she shared that her sister had divorced Steve after confronting him about the rumors. Steve had boasted to her that he had fathered 2 additional children during this time. These accounts painted a complicated picture of relationships shrouded in secrecy, deception, and emotional repercussions that I could no longer ignore. I approached Jill to request her sister's phone number, and she readily complied, demonstrating her willingness to assist me. I had intentions to use this information at a later time for my own purposes. Regarding the male acquaintance, he had harbored feelings for Carla throughout their high school years, yet she had never reciprocated those feelings. He recounted how Carla had professed her love for a boy named Steve, although she had reservations about marrying him due to his perceived self-absorbed nature. According to him, Steve had been attempting to cultivate a closer relationship with Carla for 3 years. Carla had set firm boundaries, stating that she intended to reserve her virginity for her future spouse, suggesting that after that significant milestone, she might reconsider her position regarding Steve, perhaps for nostalgic reasons. This revelation was particularly painful for the individual sharing this information, as he had long envisioned himself as Carla's future husband. The realization that she might not remain loyal to him stung deeply. He began to believe that if Steve actively pursued Carla, she might entertain the idea of rekindling their connection. This insight prompted him to cease his attempts to date Carla, as her apparent attitude and intentions were disheartening. It became increasingly clear to me that Carla had not intended to be faithful, and this understanding weighed heavily on me. I had compiled most of the information I needed from my sources, but I sought further clarity regarding Steve. To attain this, I visited the bank where he worked, choosing not to reveal my identity during the visit. Instead, I aimed to observe him in person. He appeared just as he was portrayed in photographs, tall and athletic. However, it was unfortunate that he had garnered a negative reputation, as otherwise, he might have been considered a desirable partner. With a few more calls to make and errands to run before returning home, I felt assured that I would be back in my own space well before night fell. I checked into the Candlewood Suites extended stay hotel near the airport, and later that evening, I reached out to Carla around 8:30 p.m. I informed her of my plans to return home around noon the following day and suggested that she take the afternoon off to spend some quality time together. Despite my circumstances, I had cultivated a sense of resilience and opted not to disclose the information I had uncovered. Given that I believed she had deceived me over the years, I rationalized that a few misrepresentations on my part would not be particularly harmful. I reassured Carla of my ongoing love for her and maintained that everything would ultimately work out. After our conversation, I settled in for a good night's sleep. The following morning, I made a visit to my office, where I engaged in a comprehensive discussion with Jim, my colleague. He was keen to hear about my findings, and I shared the details of my investigation with him. In the process, he handed me an overnight envelope from the DNA lab, where I had submitted my samples the previous day. Although the overnight service came at an additional cost, I was grateful for the expedited results. With a sense of urgency, I opened the envelope in front of Jim, as it was crucial for him to be informed about the findings. As my friend and boss, his awareness of the situation could prove valuable as I navigated the complexities ahead. The report began, "Dear Mr. Phillips, we have completed testing on all 5 samples you provided on Wednesday, November 15th. Sample 1 is a male and is a full sibling to Sample 2, which is also a male. Sample 3 is a male who is a full sibling to Sample 4, which is female. Samples 1 and 2 share the same father but have a different mother than Samples 3 and 4. In essence, all 4 samples share a common father, yet Samples 1 and 2 are unrelated to the mother of Samples 3 and 4. Additionally, Sample 5, which belongs to you, Mr. Phillips, shows no familial connections to any of the other samples. There is no DNA evidence indicating that you are the biological father of any of the 4 children represented by Samples 1 to 4. If you require further assistance, please do not hesitate to contact us. Sincerely, David Rafey, Ph.D., Accurate DNA Labs Incorporated." After receiving this information, I reached out to Steve's ex-wife and arranged a meeting with her. She consented to meet and permitted me to take saliva swabs from her 2 children. I had prepared a sworn statement in my briefcase, confirming her voluntary provision of DNA samples for her children. Before my departure, Jim offered a warm hug, expressing his sympathy for the discoveries I had made and the challenges I was facing. He assured me of his support and willingness to assist in any way possible. Light-heartedly, he made a jest, suggesting that I should be careful, or I might inadvertently take his job, considering the thoroughness of my approach to the investigation. The thoroughness of my investigation within such a limited timeframe resulted in a momentary shared laugh between us, a fleeting instance of levity in what had rapidly evolved into an overwhelmingly burdensome situation. I had compiled various pieces of evidence, including tape statements from several of Carla's former classmates, a letter from Steve's ex-wife, a certified letter from the DNA laboratory, and weighed down by the heaviness of my own heart. Armed with this information, I prepared to return home and confront my wife about the truth of our relationship. I arrived at the house just a few minutes prior to noon. Upon entering, I opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and settled into the family room, anxiously awaiting Carla's return. Shortly after midday, I heard the familiar sound of her entry through the garage door. She rushed over, her expectation evident as she sought out a hug and a kiss. Instinctively, I stepped back, evading her embrace, aware of the unusual expression that flickered across her face at my reaction. However, deep down, I understood the weight of the conversation that lay ahead, knowing it was only going to escalate from there. Carla's brow furrowed with concern as she inquired about the reason for my distance. I offered her a beer in an attempt to ease the tension, but she declined, insisting instead that I simply tell her what was troubling me. With a heavy heart, I responded, "Carla, I know you've been having an affair." The words hung in the air, charged with emotion, as she began to speak, her instinct being to deny my accusation. I quickly raised my hand to stop her, firmly stating my intention to hear nothing from her at that moment. I had already gathered the necessary proof, and at that point, there was no longer any reason to believe anything she might say. I instructed her to sit on the sofa, emphasizing that I only needed her to listen, not to talk, cry, deny, or apologize. Those reactions were irrelevant at this juncture, I merely required her silence as I presented my case. The color drained from her face, and I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. I offered her a choice again. Did she want a beer or perhaps a glass of water? She opted for water, and I promptly retrieved it before positioning a chair across from her. Sitting down allowed me to look her in the eye, establishing a clear line of communication as I prepared to share my thoughts. "Carla, I know you are having an affair," I began again. "I want to make it abundantly clear that I possess ample evidence to support this claim. In the interest of fairness, I need you to understand that I am not lying to you. My hope is for your actions moving forward to reflect the gravity of the situation we are in. It would be wise for you to accept this reality. Should you remain in doubt, you may find yourself making further mistakes that will only exacerbate the consequences of your actions." At this point, I laid out my plan for the immediate future. "Today, I will be leaving this house," I stated decisively. "I will pack everything I might need for the next month, and I will move out. Legally, we will still be married, but for the next month, I will not reside here." When I mentioned my decision, a gasp escaped her lips, and I noted that she began to whimper softly, though she did not openly weep or attempt to voice her protests. I continued, detailing what I expected from her during this time apart. "Over the course of this month, there are two crucial tasks that I require you to undertake. First, you must determine if you love me and if you wish to continue as my wife. Regardless of my decisions, this choice must be made by you. If you find that you no longer love me or do not want to be my wife, then nothing else matters. It is imperative that you take the time to reflect on this, but I do not wish to hear your response today. After 1 month, you may communicate your decision to me." I paused briefly, allowing the weight of my words to sink in before proceeding. "Secondly, I need you to put everything in writing regarding your betrayal of our marriage. The Carla I married is someone I fondly remember, but the woman before me now is unrecognizable. As such, I require a full account of your affair or affairs. I want to know every detail, who you were involved with, whether it was one individual or multiple partners, and, if so, the names of every person. It is essential that you explain what compelled you to seek comfort outside our marriage, what they provided that I was unable to offer." As I spoke, I felt the gravity of the moment. I need to understand when it began, how often it took place, where the interactions occurred, what you did together, and what was said. I need to know what you stood to gain from these affairs. Every single detail matters, Carla. Do not withhold information or attempt to deceive me. This is vital for any possibility of salvaging our marriage. I have concrete evidence of your actions, and I expect you to be transparent in your account. Your forthcoming honesty will shape the path that lies ahead for us. If you choose to lie to me, I can assure you that it will be the end of our relationship. However, if you are willing to divulge every truthful detail, there exists a possibility that we could salvage our marriage. I emphasize the word possibility, as it is critical to understand that there are no guarantees involved, and I do not want you to misinterpret this as a promise. The seriousness of the situation was evident in your eyes as I noticed the rising panic. It was clear that you comprehended the weight of the decision that lay before you. If, for any reason, you find yourself unable or unwilling to share the truth, I ask that you communicate your decision to me by the end of this month. In such a case, we can bring our marriage to a close as swiftly and painlessly as possible. At this moment, the responsibility of decision-making rests squarely on your shoulders. Over the next month, you will need to reflect on your feelings regarding our marriage and determine whether you wish to continue this partnership. When you have reached a conclusion, you can send me an email at my work address, attaching your written account of the situation. I expect to receive both your decision and the account exactly 4 weeks from today. Any deviation from this timeline will not be accepted. Additionally, it is imperative that you understand that if I ever discover that you resume your affair, our marriage will be terminated without hesitation. Regarding our children, I need to know your preference. Do you wish for them to stay with you throughout the coming month, or would you prefer that I take them? I am amenable to either arrangement. If you choose to keep them, I will make it a point to visit every Wednesday evening. I will collect them from the babysitter and care for them until 8:30 p.m., at which point I will return them to you. I will notify you upon my arrival so that you can come to retrieve them. As I know you will be at home on weekends, I can arrange to have them on one of the 2 days that you work. Just inform me of the schedule that suits you best, and I will adhere to it. Alternatively, if you decide that you do not want the children with you, I will offer the same schedule to you, allowing you to pick the kids up from the babysitter on Wednesdays and ensuring that I am back with them by 8:30 p.m. You can also choose a weekend day when I will bring them to you. As the next step, I will begin packing my belongings now. Once I have finished, I will be leaving. I ask that you come to a decision about the children before I go." With that final statement, I exited the room and ascended the stairs to pack my bags. While I was in the process of packing, I could hear the sound of her sobbing from downstairs. However, by the time I returned to the main floor, she had managed to regain some composure, though her eyes were red and her makeup was smeared. She appeared to be more in control of her emotions. "Dawn, I know you don't want to hear this," she began, to which I replied, "You're right, I don't want to hear it. Please follow my instructions, or we can terminate this marriage immediately." At that moment, I needed her to decide whether she wanted to keep the kids or if I should take them. With tears in her eyes, she responded, "I want them with me." Accepting her choice, I said, "Okay then, I will be leaving. I will call you tomorrow to discuss the schedule for picking up the children on Wednesdays and one weekend day. Goodbye, Carla." I departed, and the month that followed passed more rapidly than anticipated. Every Wednesday evening, I took our children, Steve and Lori, out for dinner, returning them afterward to my temporary hotel suite. Being so young, Lori did not have much understanding of the situation at hand, but Steve, on the other hand, seemed to sense that something was amiss. He inquired why I was not at home, and I explained that his mother and I were addressing some marital issues, attempting to work through them, and for now, it was best if I stayed elsewhere. I reassured him not to worry and emphasized that both his mother and I loved him and Lori dearly. Steve appeared content with my explanation, and I chose to leave the matter there for the time being. Each time I dropped the kids off at their home, I encountered Carla. She would come to the front door, greeting the children as they arrived and ensuring they entered the house safely. There were moments when she began to walk toward my vehicle to speak with me, but I firmly raised my hand to signal her to stop, driving away while she stood there, tears streaming down her face. She remained in that doorway as I drove off, a stark image of the emotional turmoil that had enveloped our lives. Exactly 1 month from the day of our confrontation, I received an email from Carla. The message read as follows: "Dear Dawn, I want you to know that I am deeply sorry for the pain you've endured. I love you and I want to be your wife. Please call me after reading my letter. I want you back in my life. I need you, and your children need you. Love, Carla." Upon reading her email, I could not shake the feeling that Carla's words would not reflect complete honesty. I suspected that she would not acknowledge the reality that Steve and Lori were not my biological children. Attached to the email was a lengthy and heartfelt letter addressed to Dawn, expressing the author's deep emotions and complicated circumstances. The letter began with a direct plea for reconciliation, stating, "Dear Dawn, I'm writing this letter to persuade you to return to me. I love you deeply, and I want to continue being your wife and grow old with you." Although such sentiments may seem straightforward, the author immediately acknowledged the complexity of the situation that lay ahead. She revealed her commitment to honesty, stating that her truth would likely inflict pain, which was never her intention. The crux of her message was the admission that she loved 2 men, Dawn and Steve Wilson. She conceded that while many might categorize her relationship with Steve as an affair, she did not see it that way. The term affair usually invokes images of fleeting infatuations culminating in brief, secretive romantic encounters. However, her connection with Steve was rooted in a history that predated her relationship with Dawn. The author reflected on their past, recalling that she had been involved with Steve before she met Dawn. Their relationship had begun during her sophomore year in high school. Steve was characterized as handsome, charming, intelligent, and caring, qualities that captivated her. She realized that her love for him was genuine, as he represented the ideal partner in many respects. Yet, she identified a significant flaw. Steve's attractiveness and confidence suggested that he would not remain faithful, making any prospect of marriage implausible. Determined to preserve her virginity for her future husband, she resisted Steve's attempts to persuade her otherwise, even as the temptation lingered. Shortly after, she met Dawn and quickly recognized her love for him. Despite her feelings for Dawn, she could not extinguish her affection for Steve, leading to a complex emotional landscape where she loved both men differently but equally. Steve's persistent pursuit did not cease with her commitment to Dawn. He continued to express his feelings even after she had found her love. In a moment of vulnerability, she had suggested that perhaps once she had shared intimacy with her future husband, she might reconsider the boundaries of her relationship with Steve. This admission marked a turning point. Following her marriage to Dawn, she found herself unable to sever ties with Steve despite knowing deeply that Dawn was her true partner. When intimacy between her and Steve ensued, it opened the door to complications she never anticipated. Eventually, she became pregnant and, recognizing the likelihood that Steve was the father, she faced an unprecedented dilemma. Her desire was for Don to be her husband, not Steve, complicating the emotional fallout of her actions. The subsequent revelation of the impending child further strained their relationship. Despite the circumstances, Don accepted the situation without questioning the child's paternity, believing himself to be the father since he was the one who had taken her virginity. Even after their marriage, she could not fully disengage from Steve. The meetings continued discreetly every month or so, as she navigated her feelings for both men. She acknowledged the genuine love she had for Don, commending him as a fantastic father to their child, and recognized his qualities as a husband, qualities that made her question her actions and motives throughout their marriage. While the letter was laden with painful truths, it was clear that her love for Don grew consistently alongside her unresolved feelings for Steve. Despite her growing affection for Don, she found herself scrutinizing him, perhaps in the hope of justifying her actions should he ever falter. However, his steadfastness only deepened her feelings of guilt. As she continued her letter, she resolved to provide further clarity to Don, motivated by his request for answers. She touched upon the specifics of her relationship with Steve, reaffirming her deep emotional connection to him. The narrative encompassed their encounters, their locations, and the nature of their meetings, detailed memories that underscored the complexity of her feelings and choices as she sought to explain the multifaceted love she harbored within her heart. It was a situation that unfolded gradually, with moments shared once a month or occasionally every other month. During these limited encounters, we made the most of our time together, embracing intimacy in ways that brought us closer. We made love, engaged in playful activities, and shared profound conversations filled with laughter, kisses, and tender hugs. He introduced experiences that I had not savored with you, moments that I had initially been reluctant to embrace. Yet, given the constraints of our time together, I allowed those actions to unfold with him. It was a bittersweet concession, as I held the understanding that our time was fleeting. Steve expressed his love for me, and I found a sense of solace in that acknowledgement, considering my role as your wife. The contrast between our situations was undeniable. I lived alongside you while he only had me for short visits. Eventually, Steve entered into marriage himself, but true to my expectations, it did not endure. His infidelity became apparent, revealing his ongoing relationships with me and other women. It was a scenario that ultimately led to his wife's discovery of his betrayals, culminating in their divorce. In the midst of that turmoil, he urged me to leave you and marry him, but I firmly resisted. I was aware that if I took such a step, I would be placing myself in a scenario bound for similar heartache, as I was certain he would repeat his past mistakes. Reflecting on it all, I find it interesting that the standards I set for a husband's character were significantly elevated compared to those I exhibited as a wife. This realization brings me deep regret. I recognize I have shared a considerable amount, but there remain two vital elements that you need to understand. Steve is also the biological father of Lore. I am currently pregnant, and I suspect that this pregnancy occurred during my last encounter with him. Consequently, this means that all three of our children shared the same biological father, Steve. My intention was to ensure that they were biological siblings, fostering a sense of connection without any ambiguity. Nevertheless, you are and will always be their father in every sense that matters. You have shown them love and care throughout the years, while Steve has remained absent from their lives, choosing not to engage with them at all. It is crucial for me to emphasize that I do not want him to take on the role of father in their lives. That role belongs solely to you. I am profoundly sorry for the pain this situation has caused you and recognize how deeply you have been hurt. If there were a way to reverse these events, I would seize the opportunity without hesitation. My hope is that you will consider returning to me, that you will allow us the chance to work through this and salvage our marriage. I am praying that the bond we share is strong enough to inspire you to come back. I understand that I have not addressed every question that may be on your mind, but I promise to be open and provide answers to any inquiries you have. I am earnestly pleading for the opportunity to make things right. I will be here, awaiting your call with the hope held in my heart. Love, Carla. The following day, which fell on a Friday, I reached out to Carla to inform her of my decision to come home early the next morning. I requested that she take the day off and arrange for the kids to be dropped off at a babysitter, as we had a significant amount to discuss. She consented to my request and asked what was on my mind. I replied that she would have to wait until the next day to find out, and ended the call. When the next day arrived, I stepped into the house to find Carla in the kitchen waiting for me, holding a cup of coffee that I accepted with gratitude. I suggested that we sit at the table together so I could address some serious matters with her. Once we were settled, I opened my briefcase and placed a substantial stack of documents and files on the table. "Carla, this is my evidence," I stated, as I laid out the contents before her. "This first item is an audio recording. From it, I uncovered several troubling truths. You have been having an affair with a man named Steve, and this relationship has persisted since before our marriage began. To make matters worse, I learned that neither of our 2 children is biologically mine. It appears that you had intentions of intentionally becoming pregnant again with him, resulting in our family expanding with a 3rd child that I would have been unaware of." As I spoke, I watched the expression on her face shift to one of disbelief. I continued, "You professed your love for me and expressed a desire not to leave me for him. If you are curious about the origins of the recording, it comes from the audio device we initially set up to capture your snoring. I erased everything except the snoring portion to conceal the fact that I was aware of your affair. In truth, I did not go to New York as you believed. Instead, I traveled to Chicago Heights to investigate your past, to uncover who Steve was, and to learn the truth regarding my children. This is why you were unable to reach me while I was supposedly in New York. Upon discovering the reality of our situation, I felt compelled to distance myself from you. To further substantiate my findings, I placed high school yearbooks on the table. I thought it prudent to start with these. I catalogued a list of every individual who had written comments in your yearbook, categorizing them based on their connections to you. I laid down my cross-reference list atop the yearbooks and pulled out the booklet from the school reunion as well. The school administration recently provided me with a booklet in preparation for your upcoming class reunion. I utilized this resource to compile a comprehensive list of current names, addresses, and phone numbers for everyone included on my contact list. Through my efforts, I was able to gather crucial information from individuals such as Jill Johnson Marker and Steve's wife's sister, who was also part of your graduating class. Furthermore, I was in contact with a former classmate who harbored feelings for you for an extended period, and he proved to be quite instrumental in my investigation. He revealed to me that his affection for you waned once he learned about your intention to pursue a relationship with Steve while I was unaware, particularly after we had made the commitment of marriage. Many of your former friends and acquaintances from our hometown are well aware of your actions and the type of person you have become, Carla. It is perplexing to me how you could have thought that Steve would remain silent regarding the situation, especially as he was also a participant in this matter. The next significant piece of information I uncovered was a folder containing a letter from the DNA lab. This letter unequivocally confirms that I am not the biological father of our 2 children. In my pursuit of the truth, I reached out to Steve's ex-wife, who graciously agreed to meet with me. She permitted me to collect DNA samples from her 2 children, who are the biological offspring of Steve. The letter affirms that these samples were obtained with her explicit consent, and it certifies that Steve and Lori are indeed half-siblings to Steve Wilson's 2 children. This documentation from Mrs. Wilson ensures the legitimacy of the samples collected from her and her 2 sons. I removed another folder from my briefcase, which contains all the evidence I currently possess. I have a strong belief that, should I choose to pursue this further, I could unearth additional incriminating materials, such as hotel receipts, traces of bodily fluids on various items of clothing or other possessions that might reveal further truths. I suspect there exists a wealth of evidence yet to be uncovered, potentially including eyewitness accounts, that could come to light with further effort. However, I do not feel it necessary to continue this investigation to establish the full extent of your extramarital affair, do I? Carla shook her head in response. I am not someone who derives any satisfaction from learning about my wife's involvement with another man and certainly do not have any desire to delve into the details of your actions. Therefore, I will refrain from asking you about that. Your letter has confirmed the facts I have gathered, and for once, I appreciate your honesty. I thank you for your courage in ceasing to lie to me, Carla. I loved you deeply and devoted everything I had to our marriage, believing that you reciprocated those feelings and efforts. I was incredibly content with you. However, upon discovering that the foundation of our relationship was built upon falsehoods, I am left with no choice but to conclude that our marriage itself has essentially become a lie. Initially, when I uncovered this truth, I felt an overwhelming desire to confront you physically, and possibly even Steve. Thankfully, that feeling has lessened, but I remain prepared to take action if it becomes necessary. Throughout this discussion, I observed the changing expressions on Carla's face. Her initial shock at my revelations transformed into a profound anxiety regarding the future of our marriage. This shift intensified when I admitted that I once contemplated confronting her physically. I then opened the final file laid out before us. These are the divorce papers, which I have already signed. All that remains is for you to add your signature. Accompanying these documents are provisions granting me full custody of our children, including your unborn child. At that moment, her expression transitioned from fear to sheer panic. I perceived a glimpse of desperation in her eyes, which evoked a deep sadness within me. This is not the outcome I desired, but I feel there are no alternatives left for me. I cannot continue to exist in the toxic environment you have created. Once you sign these papers, I will store them securely in my safe deposit box. Whether I ultimately file them with the courts will depend entirely upon your subsequent actions. If you consent to my terms, I will refrain from divorcing you or forcing you out of our lives. However, it is clear that we will not function as husband and wife in the foreseeable future. I expect you to begin moving your belongings into the spare bedroom without delay, as I intend to occupy the master bedroom. Additionally, I anticipate that Steve will contribute $2,000 annually for each child in child support, which will be deposited into a trust account for each child until they reach the age of 18, including the new baby. The calculations indicate that the total amount now stands at $330,000, which includes $116,000 for Stephen and $88,000 for the other child. It is abundantly clear that Steve's involvement has been significant. Furthermore, it is a requirement that a fully paid life insurance policy be acquired, valued at $18,000, with the children named as beneficiaries. The policy must have you designated as the owner, which provides you the authority to make any necessary modifications to the policy as deemed fit. Upon fulfilling the commitment to voluntary child support, a letter will be dispatched to him confirming that the ownership of the policy will be reverted back to him. However, if he fails to meet any of these stipulations, I will be compelled to make this situation public and initiate legal proceedings aimed at recovering both the overdue and future child support payments. Such court-mandated payments will be deducted directly from his wages by his current and potential future employers, which may have repercussions on his career progression. I remain indifferent to his professional advancement as long as he abides by the terms set forth. Should he agree to these conditions but subsequently neglect his future obligations, the benefits from the life insurance policy will serve to provide for his children. The interpretation of this situation is left to him, and all of this information will be formally articulated through a letter from my attorney, accompanied by copies of the evidence collected thus far. In light of these developments, an update on his choices is warranted. He is free to leave at any time, provided he departs without the children. He can simply pack his belongings and go. Alternatively, he can choose to sign the necessary papers, thereby remaining in the household with his children, albeit under the understanding that we will no longer function as a married couple. There seems to be no need for him to engage an attorney, considering the limited nature of his options. However, should he wish for legal counsel to review the documents, he has until next Tuesday morning to arrange that. It is crucial to clarify that if he refuses to sign the divorce and custody papers, and attempts to leave with the children, I will not hesitate to locate him and pursue legal action. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding our marriage, I will not relinquish my children, as neither they nor I deserve such an outcome. I will not tolerate any actions that threaten this arrangement. Moreover, there is an additional condition that must be adhered to: he is to have no contact with Steve. Should there be any violation of this stipulation and I become aware of it, both he and Steve will face serious repercussions. It should be understood that the emotional ties that may have existed between the three of us have already been severed. The stakes are high, and he must recognize that making a reckless decision could result in the loss of his relationships with our children as well. With those terms communicated, I presented him with the divorce and custody papers. His response was clear: he agreed to sign them immediately. Consequently, he signed both documents, and I secured them in my briefcase, informing him of my plan to deposit them in my safe deposit box at the bank. I also reiterated that he should move his belongings to the spare bedroom, as we had discussed. With that, I bid farewell, telling him, "Carla, I'll see you tomorrow," and departed. The following day, I returned and began the process of settling back into the house. Carla had already moved her items to the designated spare room, adhering to our prior arrangement. Life continued, and in the eyes of an outsider, our household appeared relatively normal. We maintained a facade of civility, engaged in conversations, shared meals, played with our children, and laughed at their antics. From the outside, we resembled a typical family. However, the crux of our relationship had fundamentally altered. The intimacy that once defined our marriage was conspicuously absent. There were no lingering glances exchanged between us, no affectionate gestures shared, and the warmth that had previously characterized our connection had dissipated entirely. I made a conscious effort to avoid any physical contact with her, establishing a boundary that left no room for emotional or physical intimacy. The passage of time felt relentless, often weighing heavily upon us. Nights stretched long as I lay awake, ruminating on the depth of our loss, yearning for a return to what once was. It felt as though I was trapped within a waking nightmare, one I desperately wished would simply dissolve. I was acutely aware that Carla endured her own share of sleepless nights, battling her turmoil. Occasionally, the sound of her weeping would reach me, and in the past, those sorrowful emanations would have deeply affected me. There was a time when her tears would have compelled me to do everything in my power to restore her joy. Yet, now, I would retreat to my bed and contemplate the transformation I had undergone, becoming cold and emotionally withdrawn. I recognized that I had changed into a version of myself that I could no longer respect, yet I was numb to her suffering and, regrettably, even my own. As the months progressed, Carla made numerous attempts to bridge the emotional chasm that had formed between us. Each effort seemed to serve as a painful reminder of the connection we once shared, a connection now overshadowed by the harsh reality of our circumstances. Carla made several attempts to engage me in conversations regarding her actions, expressing a desire for us to talk things through in the hopes of rediscovering a path to happiness. Despite her efforts, I responded with bluntness, making it unequivocally clear that I had no interest in hearing any more about her betrayal. I firmly believed there was nothing she could say that would rectify the situation between us. Each time I rejected her overtures for communication, she would retreat into herself, seeking solace in the confines of her room, where her cries echoed, filling the space with her anguish. During this tumultuous period, Carla's body was undergoing significant changes as her pregnancy advanced, adding another layer of complexity to our strained relationship. One Friday morning, she called to inform me that she was in labor, which prompted a sense of urgency within me. I hurried home to take her to the hospital, my mind racing with mixed emotions about our fractured relationship and the new life about to enter the world. After 3 hours of labor, Carla gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I remained with her in the labor room, providing support as she transitioned to the delivery room. I even held her hand as she endured the excruciating pain of childbirth, a moment fraught with tension and unspoken words. When Carla asked me what name I wanted for the baby, I suggested the name Grace, intending to refer to her as Gracie. This choice caught Carla off guard, particularly because Grace was the name of her mother. Knowing my reservations about her mother due to the family's past treatment of me, I offered her freedom in naming the child. I stated explicitly that she could choose any name she wished, as long as it bore no connection to me or my family. My response visibly shocked and hurt her, but I felt a newfound resolve that rendered me indifferent to her feelings. The transformation I was undergoing allowed me to distance myself from the emotional turmoil that had once engulfed me. I walked away from our interaction, resolved in my decision. The following day, I visited Gracie at the hospital, and I was instantly enchanted by her. She was absolutely precious, and within mere moments, I found myself utterly captivated. I fell in love with her, an affection so profound that it prompted questions within me. How could I possibly love a child who belonged to another man? This was not the first time I had experienced such feelings. It had happened previously with Stephen and Lori, though I had been unaware they were not my biological children at the time. Now, witnessing the same phenomenon again was perplexing. I could not rationalize the emotions stirring within me, yet they were undeniably real. On Sunday, I returned to the hospital to bring Carla and Gracie home. Upon my arrival, I encountered a tense atmosphere. Carla's parents were already present in her hospital room. Grace, her mother, confronted me, demanding to know why I had not visited Carla the previous day when I came to see the baby. I anticipated that Carla would defend me in that moment, but she remained silent, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she turned away. Her lack of defense shocked me, and I felt a surge of disgust and fury wash over me. I responded to Grace by asserting that what I chose to do or not do was none of her business. If she wanted answers, she should direct her inquiries to her daughter. Her immediate retort insinuated that I had no right to speak to her in that manner, recounting her position as my wife's mother and the concern she felt for her daughter. I turned once more to Carla, seeking some form of solidarity. Eventually, she lifted her head and softly spoke, urging her parents to leave, indicating it was time for me to take her and Gracie home. Before departing, her father could not restrain himself from offering his opinion, chastising me for not treating my wife's parents respectfully. His comment ignited a fierce response within me. I told him never to call me son again, stating clearly that I had never been his son and never would be. As tension simmered, I requested that he leave us in peace. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words and unresolved issues as we drove home. Carla expressed her apologies, her tone laced with concern. I questioned her sincerity, pointing out that her parents had never shown me an ounce of respect as their son-in-law. They had consistently regarded their daughter's marriage to me as a step beneath her. I indicated that her silence during her mother's confrontation was telling. My feelings were a mix of disappointment and realization. Her lack of defense in the face of disrespect was telling of her true stance. It became painfully clear that she had been complicit in allowing her family's disdain for me to persist. Time passed, and in the following months, I kept myself preoccupied with various tasks and responsibilities. Despite the emotional turmoil, I felt the need for clarity regarding Gracie's lineage. I arranged for a DNA test, and the results confirmed my suspicions. Gracie was indeed Stephen's child. However, I found that I was largely unconcerned with the outcome of the test. I had expected it. My primary motive for obtaining the results was documentation. My love for this little girl was unwavering, as genuine as any biological connection could ever be. No father could love a child more than I loved Gracie. Each time she looked up at me and smiled, it warmed my heart and reinforced the bond we had already formed. That love had been firmly established within the first few minutes of my visit to the hospital, creating a profound connection that transcended biology and circumstance. The memories of those cherished moments spent with my children remain vivid and enduring in my mind. I dedicated myself to being the best father possible, striving to fulfill their needs and nurture their growth at every opportunity. My relationship with Stephen and Lori deepened daily, and my love for them expanded beyond measure. Each passing day reinforced my conviction that they were the greatest gifts of my life, and I never once questioned or regretted my role as their father. While Steve Wilson may have contributed half of their genetic makeup, my commitment to them went far beyond biology. I was their father in every meaningful sense. Our lives together were filled with joy and affection, and that bond became the cornerstone of my existence. However, as much as I reveled in the love of my children, a significant void remained in my heart: Carla. Thoughts of her often invaded my mind, and I frequently reflected on the depth of our relationship and the profound impact she had on my life. I found myself missing her acutely, longing for the woman who had once filled my life with love. My emotions sometimes overwhelmed me, leading to tears that were impossible to suppress. In an act of desperation and driven by a need for answers, I utilized my connections to gain access to Steve Wilson's private communications. I recognized the immorality of this choice, yet I felt compelled to act in my pursuit of understanding the situation that had unfolded. As anticipated, I discovered details that confirmed my darkest fears. Carla had reached out to Steve, unable to resist the urge to share the news of her new child. I overheard their conversation. A mixture of excitement and tension filled the exchange. Carla's voice was familiar yet distant as she told Steve about their daughter, Gracie. In her words, I detected both joy and an undeniable longing for the past, a past that no longer included me in the way I once envisioned. Their dialogue revealed Carla's conflicted feelings about their reunion. Despite the affection that lingered between them, she expressed a desire to salvage her marriage with me. Yet, her admissions only hardened my resolve. I resolved to protect my heart, directing all the affection I once held for Carla toward my children. My love for Stephen, Lori, and now Gracie filled my life with purpose and significance, leaving no room for the remnants of a relationship that had caused me so much pain. Months rolled by, and then tragedy struck. Steve Wilson, the man who had intertwined his life with Carla and indirectly with my own, met an untimely end in a car accident. The news reached Carla in a heart-wrenching manner. A stranger's voice on the phone delivered the painful message that would forever alter her reality. I had maintained the phone tap for reasons unknown even to myself, and it became a harbinger of both revelation and sorrow. The shock was palpable in her gasp, a moment that encapsulated the weight of loss. Upon returning home that evening, I noticed a peculiar look on Carla's face. Despite my usual demeanor, she remained silent. In the following days, I heard her sobbing, an echo of her grief resonating through our home, an expression of the bond that had fractured in the wake of recent events. Soon after, she received a letter from the insurance company, formalizing Steve's death and naming our children as beneficiaries. When she approached me to seek guidance on how to navigate the complexities of the claim, I was struck by the intersection of tragedy that now defined our lives. In the aftermath of these events, my focus remained on my children, who were my bedrock during these tumultuous times. Their love and affection provided me strength and purpose, reinforcing the notion that, despite the heartache that filled the spaces once occupied by Carla, I could find solace and meaning in the bonds I had built with my children. The love I had cultivated with them remained unwavering and profound, an anchor in a stormy sea of emotion and loss. Life continued, and I understood that I had to embrace the love that surrounded me, allowing it to drown out the echoes of the past. Upon receiving the envelope in the mail, Carla's expression shifted into one of confusion and disbelief. She turned to me with a peculiar look and remarked, "You didn't seem shocked when you found out Steve had died." Her comment hung in the air, and I quickly responded, "Carla, I have no feelings for Steve one way or another. I'm not shocked, and frankly, I don't care. My primary concern is ensuring that his children have the necessary funds for their college education." My detached reaction seemed to disturb her further, as she continued to gaze at me with an air of incredulity. A week later, a check for $18,000 arrived, representing the payout from Steve's life insurance policy. Without delay, Carla and I took the necessary steps to deposit those funds into the college accounts set up for each of his children. Once the deposits were made, each child's account reflected a substantial balance, $46,000, augmented by a modest amount of interest accrued from Steve's original deposits. By the time Stephen would be ready to attend college, he would have access to approximately $80,000, while Lori's account would grow to around $100,000, and Gracie's would reach an impressive $130,000. These funds would significantly alleviate the financial burden associated with their educational journeys. On our way back home, I casually mentioned that at the very least, the children's college expenses had been secured, allowing us to avoid the perennial worry of funding their education year after year. However, upon reaching home, Carla expressed a desire to discuss something important. I acquiesced, and she posed a question that weighed heavily on her mind. "Do you think you could ever forgive me and love me again?" My response was immediate. I shook my head in a clear gesture of refusal. Carla retaliated by labeling me as a cold-hearted individual. I candidly admitted that her accusation was entirely accurate. Carla pressed on, asking how I could have become so emotionally distant. I explained that I had never been like this in the past, but her actions had undoubtedly altered my perception and emotional state over time. I assured her that my feelings of emotional detachment did not extend to my children. She acknowledged that she was not privy to that aspect of my personality when I was with them. I further articulated that it was apparent to me that our relationship had never been grounded in genuine love or mutual respect. Instead, I felt that Carla had simply been using me throughout the years, and would continue to do so if given the opportunity. In a surprising twist, Carla abruptly shifted the conversation and inquired whether I had played a role in Steve's death. I was taken aback but knew that she had likely suspected this ever since she learned of his passing. I nodded in affirmation. When she pressed for an explanation, I revealed that I had been eavesdropping on her phone conversations with Steve. This revelation included listening to her discussions about their plans for having another child and even her musings about a possible reconciliation, though not in the immediate future. I reiterated the point that genuine love or respect had never existed between us. Carla then asked a chilling question, "Do you think my end is near?" I nodded again, confirming that it was only a matter of time. 2 months later, she succumbed to the weight of her own despair and took her own life. Tears welled in my eyes, not for Carla, who had transformed into a stranger to me more than a year prior when I first uncovered the truths hidden within her recorded conversations, but for the pain inflicted on my children. Their innocent hearts were shattered by this tragedy, an anguish that resonated deep within me. In the aftermath, Carla left a letter meticulously placed for me to find, beginning with the words, "Dear Dawn, I am deeply apologetic." She expressed that while she had strong feelings for Steve, her love for me had always surpassed anything else. She acknowledged the destructive impact of her actions on our relationship, stating that she could not endure a life devoid of my love. Carla recognized the immense pain she had caused me and had hoped, perhaps naively, that in time, I might find it in my heart to forgive her and rekindle the love we once shared. She reflected on the choices that had irrevocably changed both of us, noting that the moment she witnessed me confront Steve, she understood that our love had dissipated. The weight of her realization, that she had effectively ruined the life of a good man, would haunt her to her grave. In a moment of introspection, she admitted that I may not have been the ideal husband for her after all. What she truly desired was a partner who could accept her dual affections for both Steve and me. "I don't blame you," she wrote, "because it's an unreasonable thing to ask of anyone, but that's what I longed for." I lacked the strength to release myself from Steve's love. I should have, but I couldn't. I hope that my passing serves as a catalyst for you to finally break free from the inner turmoil that has been weighing heavily on your heart and mind. It is my sincere wish that, in the future, you will find the strength within yourself to release the anger you harbor towards both me and Steve. I pray that the day will come when you can forgive yourself for the person you have become and for the choices you made that impacted Steve so deeply. I understand that these negative emotions seem to dissipate whenever you are in the presence of your children. I can see the love and admiration shining brightly in your eyes as you look upon them, and it fills me with joy to witness their affection and love for you in return. When you gaze at them, I hope that you are able to recognize a part of me reflected within them and that this realization inspires you to love them even more for it. I long for the day when you can embrace the possibility of loving me again through the love you share with them. I find myself compelled to ask for your forgiveness for the choice I have made in this last action. The weight of it has become unbearable for me. I love you deeply, Carla. In my moments of sorrow, I shed tears that were genuine and cathartic. The anguish I had felt seemed to fade away, granting me a moment of clarity. I wept for the friend I had lost, a connection that would never again be filled with shared laughter or tears. I mourned the lover who would no longer hold me or love me as she once did. I grieved for the mother of my children, who would not partake in their lives, celebrating their joys, witnessing their weddings, cherishing their grandchildren, or supporting them through their achievements and challenges. The emptiness in my heart became palpable as the hatred that had taken residence there began to dissolve. I had previously filled that void with animosity, seeking to erase the love I harbored for you, and now, in its absence, I was confronted with a stark vacancy. I cried for the future I envisioned with you, a life that I now recognized could never be replicated. I also shed tears for my own soul, realizing the extent to which I had allowed myself to become less than human due to that hatred. In a moment of clarity, I decided to rid myself of the letter that held my pain and to eliminate all evidence of the betrayal except for the DNA test results, which I kept secured in a safe deposit box. I resolved that no one would unearth this information unless it became a necessity for my children to know the truth about their biological father, in the case of any health-related issues. I meticulously arranged my will, setting aside funds for a medical trust, and appointed a medical trustee to oversee it. The sealed envelope containing the DNA results would only be opened under specific circumstances of hereditary health concerns. My commitment was to ensure that Carla's memory remained positive and nurturing in the eyes of her children and family. The world outside did not need to bear witness to her past actions. I never obstructed Carla's parents from visiting their grandchildren. They loved them deeply and treated them well. I sensed the silent blame they held towards me for their daughter's demise, a burden evident in their eyes, yet they were wise enough to avoid vocalizing it. I assumed they approached me with kindness, perhaps fearing that any hostility might jeopardize their access to their grandchildren. While I would never have restricted their visits, I appreciated the distance they maintained over time. Gradually, the emptiness in my heart began to transform, filling with love for the children and fond memories of Carla. Despite everything that had transpired, she had brought 8 years of happiness to my life, and I no longer wished to erase that joy. Eventually, I found a pathway to forgive myself. It was a gradual process, but it came to fruition. I realized that I had 3 remarkable children who needed their father. As I sat in the front row, watching Stephen graduate from high school, a surge of pride filled me. He received his diploma from the president of the school board, who embraced him warmly. Next in line was his sister, Jennifer, who also celebrated her achievement with a diploma and a heartfelt hug. Jennifer had been Stephen's girlfriend since the first day of high school 4 years prior. A sense of pride washed over me as I observed them, and I couldn't help but believe that Carla would have shared in this pride as well. Tears filled my eyes as they walked off the stage together, looking so grown and full of promise. Both Stephen and Jennifer were set to attend the University of Illinois in the fall, their deep love for one another evident to everyone around them. It was clear to me that they were destined for a future together, perhaps even marriage. I was confident Carla would have welcomed Jennifer with open arms. After the graduation ceremony concluded, they descended into the audience to give me a big hug, and I could not have felt prouder of them. They had both excelled academically and been outstanding in sports, with a future that appeared incredibly bright ahead of them. When Stephen asked if he and Jennifer could attend a few graduation parties before coming home, I readily agreed. Jennifer approached me once more, wrapping her arms around me, and said with warmth, "Thanks, Daddy. We'll see you and Mom later." As they walked away, a profound realization struck me. The term, "daddy," that had escaped her lips signified a transformation in our relationship. I had not only become a father figure to her but had also embraced the role of a parent in her life. My journey with Leslie began a few weeks after our son Stephen started high school. Leslie, a dedicated and passionate school board president, was deeply involved in school activities. Stephen often sang the praises of his friend Jennifer and her mother, which ultimately led to our first encounter at a football game. Seeing Leslie for the first time was electric. I felt a rush of emotions as if I were a teenager experiencing a crush for the first time. My infatuation was palpable, and I could sense that I might have acted a bit foolishly in her presence. It was during our conversation that I learned about her life as a single mother. After her divorce when Jennifer was just 9, her ex-husband had chosen to distance himself from their family. Our connection grew as we spent time together that evening, and I mustered the courage to ask her out for coffee after the game, an invitation she accepted. Over time, our bond deepened significantly, leading to a shared life that blossomed into marriage just a year later. The love I have for Leslie is profound, and it is reciprocated in equal measure. For years, I had doubts about the possibility of finding lasting happiness in a marriage again, but here I am, thriving in this new chapter of my life. For the past 3 years, we have existed as a complete family unit. Leslie's affection for Stephen, Lori, and Gracie mirrors that of a mother, and I embrace Jennifer as if she were my own daughter. This experience has taught me that love transcends biological ties. One does not need to be a birth parent to cherish a child. Leslie is fully aware of my past, including the complexities surrounding Stephen and Carla. Transparency was essential to me. I understood that if I was to devote my life to Leslie, she deserved to know the truth. Upon sharing my history with her, I noticed a fleeting change in her expression. She expressed surprise at my revelations but reassured me that she believed in my commitment to move forward and leave the tumultuous past behind. This faith solidified our foundation as we embarked on life together. Our life has transformed into something remarkable. Leslie is not only my partner but also my closest friend and a source of unwavering support. She is my companion in every dream I hold dear. My heart is overflowing with love for my new wife and our children, while also holding a special place for the cherished memories of my past with Carla. Seeing Stephen flourish into a handsome young man brings back memories of Carla, as there are traits and attributes that he acquired from her. Yet, as he matures, the reflection of his father emerges more prominently. In contrast, Lori and Gracie are living embodiments of their mother's charm and beauty. It is impossible not to see Carla in them, which deepens my gratitude for the joy she brought into my life through our children. As they grew, I made it a priority to share stories and memories of their mother, ensuring that they would know and love her as I once did, understanding fully that she had a profound love for them. Just as these memories washed over me, Leslie approached, pulling me back to the present moment. She inquired about the whereabouts of Stephen and Jennifer, as they had expressed a desire to attend a couple of graduation parties before returning home. I responded with a smile, letting her know their plans. With a twinkle in her eye, Leslie suggested we make our way home and start focusing on the baby we had talked about having. This prompted us to hurry to the car, feeling a renewed sense of excitement about our future. Life is indeed good, and with each passing day, it continues to improve in ways I had never envisioned before.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.